In this video, we're going to talk about the differences between acting for the stage and acting for the screen. There are big differences between those two mediums. We'll talk more about that after the bump. Hello, welcome to Augmented Actor, where we help you augment your acting career with tips, tactics, and tech. My name is Doug Fahl, and I'd like to welcome a special guest, Bartholomew, my zit. Most actors these days are going to have to work in different mediums. You might have one specialty, you might be a theater actor, but occasionally you might get a commercial or a film or something of that nature. Film actors are versed in working on screen, but even they have some times where they have to be on a stage, even if it's for a movie. So what are some of the big differences between stage and screen? Let's talk about that starting now. Okay, for stage acting, your performance is very external. People sitting in the back row, they need to see your facial expressions, they need to see your gestures. So stage actors tend to be more external, whereas film actors are much more subtle, they're much more internal. Sometimes they don't have to do hardly anything. They can just express an emotion or what they're feeling through very subtle facial expressions. Stage actors have to turn out to the audience. They have to be seen. They have to face forward. So they're often doing awkward types of movements, whereas film actors just do the acting. They concentrate on the acting and they forget about the camera that's staring right at them. Stage actors have to keep the audience in mind, whereas film actors have to ignore the camera. A stage actor is much more in control of the storytelling nature of the project. They are on stage, it's their job to make sure the story is told. And there's a beginning, a middle, and end. The show always goes in sequence. Whereas films are shot out of sequence, and actors have to know their story arc and then just go to certain sections and give their all to those sections. They are also not responsible for the storytelling. That's up to the director and ultimately the editor of the film, because they are going to decide which shots get used and how the story is told and what reactions are seen and not seen. And that there's no control over that. You just film little bits and chunks and you do your best to tell the story through those little chunks, but it's ultimately up to the director or the editor to make the story happen. Theater actors have a certain sense of stability. You spend weeks or months sometimes rehearsing a show. You fine-tune every little detail. You're blocking your marks. The costumes are all in place. Everything, the set is all in place. You have tech week where you go down to the minor details of where lighting happens and entrances and exits and all those kind of things are all rehearsed ahead of time. Whereas with film, there's a lot of instability. There's elements like weather, lighting, sunsets and sunrises and timing. Sometimes you have to adapt to those circumstances. So sometimes in the middle of film, your script could even get rewritten or something added or something taken away. You might not get a lot of opportunities to do a take. You might get 100 opportunities to do the same take because you're just not getting it right or all the elements aren't falling into place. There's little time to rehearse, especially on camera, for things like explosions or gunshots or stunts or things like that. You got one take to do those kind of things. So it takes an immense concentration when you're working in film to keep all of those things straight in your mind. The stability of stage means that you can focus on telling the story, and it's easy to tune out the audience. It's easy to tune out all the elements that aren't necessary for the storytelling. But on film, it's very important that you have laser focus, because when the camera is rolling, you have to really concentrate on delivering your performance and not being distracted by the 100 people that are standing around you and the wind that's blowing and the rain that's coming down or the spider that's about to crawl across the floor. Anything. There's so many different elements that happen in film that are unpredictable, and you have to kind of roll with those punches. Repetition happens in both stage and film. In theater, you're going to be repeating the same show night after night after night, and you have to give the exact same performance night after night after night. You have to tell the same story with the same levels for whichever audience you have. And if you're in a long-running show, 3-4 months, or on a Broadway show, you're going to be doing that for months or years at a time. And so you have to be accustomed to repetition. And in film, repetition happens with each shot over and over and over again. You have to do the establishing shot, the close-up, the medium. You have to do different angles. You have to do over the shoulder. You have to do your close-ups, then you have to flip it around and do the other actor's close-ups. And if there's more than one actor in a scene, it can take all day just to shoot that one shot. So you have to get used to doing the same thing over and over and over. And in acting on stage, you're working within very established parameters. The show is very clean and tight, but you still have a little bit of flexibility. So each time you repeat it, you can do it a little bit differently. Whereas with film, you're going to want to change your emotional level based on where the camera is, but you have to give the same performance for continuity's sake. So if you drink from a water glass, you have to do it at the same moment of your speech every time, otherwise the editor tears their hair out. A big difference between stage and film is set and setting. On stage, you have sets. You have very minimalized to very detailed sets, but they stay pretty static. Things may fly in, the sets can change, obviously, depending on the stage you're on. But the set is pretty much suggestive of the location. And in film, you're actually in those locations. You're in those settings. So if the scene takes place in a cafeteria, you're going to actually be in a cafeteria. And if it takes place on an army base, you're going to be on an army base. If it takes place in a car, you're actually going to be inside of a car instead of a suggested car on a stage. Theater and film have a lot of waiting around. Now in theater, you are waiting around often in rehearsals while scenes are being done. You're definitely waiting around during tech while they are setting all those parameters that I talked about earlier. And during a show, you may have long periods off stage where you are waiting to go back on to do your next scene. On film, you're definitely going to be waiting. Film is all about waiting. You arrive there at 7 a.m. to get your hair and makeup done, you get mic'd up, and sometimes you can wait for 8 hours before you actually get to go on camera. Now, hopefully the more organized a set is and the bigger the crew is, the less you're going to have to wait, but you will always be waiting somewhat. Each setup in a film takes sometimes an hour to 2 hours to get the lighting set up and the camera is the right angle, and if you're not in a shot, you're going to be waiting while those actors are shooting that scene. So plan on waiting if you're going to be doing a film. The focus is different for stage actors and film actors. For stage actors, you're going to be focusing on the through line of your character and hitting those emotional beats. Singing those songs if you're in a musical or doing those dances, you got to hit those every night. And so your concentration needs to be on the story arc and your part in it and making sure that you are where you need to be. And that's where actors are focused. Stage actors can do their part on stage and then go off stage and kind of lose their focus for a while. Film actors, on the other hand, their focus is much more intense. You are focusing on your moment that you're actually shooting, on the words that you're actually concentrating on for that particular scene and nothing else. There's 100 people around, people blowing wind in your face or doing all sorts of special effects around you. The director's telling you to do things, but you have to ignore all of that stuff in the room and really focus on the attention to detail of that very moment and on your own subtle performance. Now, memorization is totally different for stage and film actors. Stage actors have to memorize their entire part and know it inside and out. Now, you may rehearse the show in a different order and you'll go over each scene over and over and over again, but you need to know your entire scene. Film actors, on the other hand, just have to memorize each scene that they're doing. So you can not have to focus so much on the rest of the show, but just focus on the 1 minute that you got to do right there. And so film actors often will work really intensely memorizing and getting solid on one scene, and then as soon as it's done, they let that go out of the brain. You know, it just disappears. So it's a different discipline for memorization. When the movie Les Miserables came out, Anne Hathaway was praised for her performance of Fantine, and she particularly sang I Dream a Dream kind of live with orchestration, and she did it all in one take. And she got accolades for that. Whereas the actresses that had played that role on Broadway said, hey, try doing that same thing with the whole show, 8 shows a week. Stage actors have to do the whole show all at once without stopping, whereas film actors might get multiple takes. I don't know how many takes Anne Hathaway did to get that number nailed in that movie, but I'm sure it was more than one. And yet she also has to concentrate on giving that really that close-up performance and the tears rolling and stuff like that, which is it's very difficult. And stage actors don't necessarily have to give that level of intimacy and vulnerability on stage as much. So there's trade-offs, and it takes a totally different skill set to be able to master either of those. The social aspect of theater and film is quite different. In theater, you are around the same group of people doing the same actions over and over and over again. You spend a lot of time in the dressing room and in rehearsals getting to know each other. You build some really solid bonds. It feels like a family. After a while, a show running feels like a well-oiled machine. You can kind of go in there and almost do the show on autopilot, depending on what show you're doing. And so you tend to have a little bit more relaxation time, and there's cast parties and this feeling of community. But once that show ends, it's done, everybody goes their separate ways, and you carry those friendships on from show to show to show sometimes, but that close-knit family never comes back. With film, there is that family life when you're on a long shoot, especially if you're a main character and you're in a lot of scenes. You spend a lot of time in a lot of different locations and a lot of different adventures with different actors. So you bond with them in different ways. You know, you do intense things with them, and then you never see them again. And on film sets, depending on the character that you're playing, you may only be shooting one day, and other people are bonding more because they're regulars on a television series, for instance, and you're a guest star. So you come in, you work with these people, you get to know them for a day, and then you never see them again. The audience experience between stage and film actors is totally different. For stage actors, you are performing for an audience. You don't get to see your performance. The only way you can experience your performance on stage is to have somebody videotape the show and get to see your performance, and it's just not the same as seeing it live. Your focus is all about giving that audience the performance that you will never get to experience. Whereas with film, television, commercials, you will get to see how your performance goes. You'll get to experience it as an audience. You also are not performing for an audience. The camera is your audience, and you're not performing for the camera. You're performing internally, and the camera is just capturing your performance. The experience of watching a film or a TV show with an audience is unlike no other as well. You're not even sure what you're going to see sometimes at a premiere or whatever. So it's exciting to experience yourself from the third person, and it's a totally surreal feeling. Stage acting is very ephemeral, very momentary. A show comes into your life and it consumes you for a period of time, and then it's done. And then you move on to your next project. And there is nothing to take from that experience except for memories. Whereas with film, you do your whirlwind of shooting, and then you come back to watch it later, and that film or commercial or television project is permanent. It lives on the internet or in movie theaters or on videotape or DVD. It can carry on for a long time. Now that can be good and bad. If you're in a really terrible film, there's always a record of your performance. Your performance can live on for many years past you. So there's definitely a permanence to film acting. Now the process of stage acting is such that you have long rehearsal periods. You rehearse for weeks and weeks and weeks, and you put the show together piece by piece. You run it, you stumble through it, you fine-tune it, you do it again, you add costumes, you add lighting. Each run through, you add an orchestra if you're in a musical, and then you tech it, you work out the fine details, then you have an opening night, then you do the run, and then you have a closing night, and then you're done. Film acting, you often don't get a rehearsal process. When you get on set, it's hurry, you get your hair, your makeup, your costumes, your mic, your lighting, all that stuff comes at you all at once, and you deliver your performance, and then you wait 6 months sometimes, a year sometimes, before you get to see the final product. And along the way, you get called back in to do ADR, which is a voiceover, or you might have to do reshoots. Once the film's in the can and it's starting to be released, then many actors they start a whole new process. Interviews, media representation, and advertising. The film comes out, audiences see it, and it gets reviewed, and then you have to make appearances. You have to go to film festivals, premieres in different places, photo shoots for the cover of the DVD or the poster or things like that. Film takes a lot longer time period to go from beginning to the end, and like I say, it lives on in perpetuity. So there's something magical about that for a film actor. If you like this video, please hit subscribe and like this video. If you found it useful, share it with your actor friends. There's also some videos on your screen right now which you might find interesting. If they're not on your screen, they're down in the YouTube description below. Have a good day. I'll see you next time.